is Charles Lawrence. I wonder if you can spare a moment of your time to hear what I have to say about my new book. I say new, but in fact it's taken over 30 years. I must emphasise, by profession, a scientist and not an historian. And as a consequence, I've used the same analytical, rigorous approach that I would normally use in my profession. However, to quote John Hamill, I brought to my research a discipline and analytical mindset unencumbered by formal historical training, and approached this age-old subject from a totally different perspective, and as a result have made some very interesting discoveries. Indeed, for the book's frontispiece, I, like Abraham Lyle, have used the iconic image of a tin of golden syrup, principally for the biblical quotation beneath the lion and its swarm of bees, since it exemplifies the root, marrow and branch of the discoveries that I have made surrounding the Premier Grand Lodge in the early 1720s, and which embraces all the essentials of the Freemasonry we know today. When as a scientist and not a ritualist, I first attempted to understand the science that was repeatedly referred to in the ritual, the only place I could find any evidence of it was in the symbolical lecture of the Royal Arch, and then only obliquely and with certain contradictions. The founders would have been perfectly aware of those contradictions. But more surprisingly, in the first official publication of Royal Arch Ritual in 1845, the science in it had remained unchanged. Why was this so? In fact, the reasons are many, but first and foremost, the founders' imperative was not to jeopardise their position in society or their relationship with the established church. They clearly adopted and adapted suitable elements of the existing ritual, knowing it would be impolitic to insert certain examples of the contentious science now being accepted by the Fellows of the Royal Society. Burning at the stake for heresy may have been a thing of the past in England, and although it was acceptable in certain circles to flaunt contentious scientific concepts, the Church was certainly not included. Indeed, such was the stranglehold of the Church on the major universities, it was still necessary to take holy orders if one wished to study beyond a Bachelor of Arts degree. After an introductory chapter, the book deals with the many examples of contemporary science alluded to in the ritual of the 1720s. The text contains many illustrations, both in black and white and colour. This figure, for example, is part of the chapter on geometry, and is used to expand on the differences between the ideas of the regular solids acceptable to the established church, as opposed to what the founders actually believed. It was clear that in order to make progress, it was necessary to establish who these strong men of 18th century science and industry were. I had to ask, who were the Georgian entrepreneurs who were laying the ground rules of a society whose eventual development would lead to the sweetness that typifies current craft Freemasonry. A brief profile is made of these important men of influence. Most may be identified from the contemporary minutes of the affiliated lodges extant at the time. Bearing in mind the prevailing social standards, this survey was enhanced by the interpolation of happenings within, but more especially those in the world outside of Freemasonry. Parodying the film, these men could be categorised as the good, the bad, and possibly the ugly, who were not just Masons but real founders, and in some cases were to become the principal rulers of the craft. Every Mason has an understanding of what Freemasonry is, from whence it stems and its basic ethos. Most are convinced of its great antiquity and laudable characteristics, such as the willingness of those of high status in society to share its egalitarian principles by exchanging the sceptre for the trowel, but resignedly accepting the protocols associated with innate ancestry and deference towards dignitaries such as the raft of aristocrats who would henceforth hold the highest possible office. In order to progress this research, it was necessary to gain some understanding of how and when the basis of this regularised Freemasonry they were advocating actually came about, but also to ask the same two questions of this newly created style of leadership. To this end, The book then considers the sociology and circumstances over the period between Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries and with it the end of the reputed aura and all-powerful position held in society by operative Masons. Their world was shattered at a stroke, and over the next 180 years they were replaced in the people's minds by speculative or free and accepted Masonry. This stylised and romantic version of Masonry was, because of its modus operandi, seen by the general public and indeed most Masons as closely related, derivative or even an extension of operative Masonry. The book then takes a closer look at the antecedents of the first 20 aristocrats who were to occupy the position of Grand Master from 1721 onwards. This reveals that there were very few indeed who could claim a long, unbroken ancestry, and further reveals an extremely strong Celtic bias and near certain influence, exemplified and triggered by James' ascendance to the English throne. The book then concentrates on the Reverend John Desaguliers, Doctor of Law, Fellow of the Royal Society, scientist, engineer, divine, and the third Grand Master of the Premier Grand Lodge in 1719, the very personification of the strong, who realised that the Premier Grand Lodge was the perfect vehicle for them to exploit and create an organisation that had the potential to be placed among the very top echelons of contemporary society. To have engineered the transformation of this low-powered gathering of people with a modest objective of only seeking a quarterly meeting between their respective lodges into a high-powered society attracting an array of the leading members of society and galvanise their interest was truly remarkable. Was that his formula for Freemason? It was effectively perfect. The famous would enjoy status and elevation without much effort or even the need to attend. Those immediately below them would enjoy the power entrusted to them by the absence of their masters and the freedom to set policy. Or those from the become part of that Premier Grand Lodge scene would have enjoyed the opportunity of association and the homage due to them on their return to their own lodges. Ordinary lodge members would either have yearned or hence worked hard to become part of that scene by whatever device they could conceive, whilst the remaining members, after having looked at the severity of the hill they were obliged to climb, would have abandoned any such attempt and remained respectfully ambivalent. Indeed, the whole set-up was very much like it is today. Now, Desaguliers had a massive influence on the formation and ethos of Premier Grand Lodge can be judged by reading his poem and notes that he published in book form, both of which are reproduced in the more readable form in the book's appendices. Having placed the principal characters in context, the remaining chapters are designed to bring together all the various pieces of the jigsaw and show just reason for the claim that science, either of itself or its overriding influence upon those at the centre of these affairs, had a massive impact on the very nature of what was to become regular modern Freemasonry. Those with a preconception about Masonry may find this an uncomfortable read. Questions are raised to which the answers are not always easy or palatable. Yet for those seeking the true key to modern Freemasonry, this book provides a solid base from which to begin the quest.